shall we? Raptors, Warriors, Game 6 for the 6. Shout out to Drake. Oracle Arena, last game there. NBA Finals, you get what I'm saying here, folks. It's historic in very many ways. Out the gate, Kyle Lowry on fire in the first half. He becomes the fastest player to reach double-digit scoring in a finals game since the merger. That was 76-77, folks. Again, tied the record for the most threes in the first quarter of an NBA Finals game with 4, and becomes the first player in Raptors postseason history with 25-5 in a single half.
We go to the third quarter, Carrie. Kawhi versus Klay. These guys trading haymakers. This was classic Game 6 Klay for 34 minutes. And then Kawhi gets it. Little window. Holds the fingers up. Nice shot. This is a bad shot for 99% of the NBA, but no problem for Klay. The leaning 3 here ties it at 76. But it's Kawhi's turn. Back and forth they would go. Serge Ibaka finds him cutting. Klay turned his back. Yes, and one. Grown man strength there. And then Klay responds, gets open. Klay with his 4th 3 of the night. Those were happier times. Oracle would get very sad very quickly here, Carrie.
You're right. Klay gets injured. Right here you can see, turns the ball over that tile. They take it the other way. Klay meets Danny Green at the rim, falls, knee buckles. You can see he's just sitting there. Right next to him, though, was Steph, because right away Steph knew this was serious because they say he's a strong guy. He rarely gets hurt in that way. Steph is just like, man, did this just happen? You can see it again. Klay realizes that he cannot actually go on. He leaves, but then you find out that if you don't shoot your free throws, you may not be able to return to the game, David. So, in fact, he comes back on, and you can feel everyone's emotion there in the arena. They are beyond excited, but he ultimately would have to leave. Take a listen, though.
When Klay goes down and is out for the game, it's just, sort of a, you got to be kidding me. Like, this has to stop. I don't know if it's related to 5 straight seasons of playing 100-plus games, all the wear and tear, but it's devastating.
And yet, no Klay, no KD. The Warriors up by 3 in the 4th. Fred VanVleet came up huge. Ties the game with that shot. Game still tied, under 4 to go. VanVleet again, straight on 3. Raptors go up by 3. 12 in the 4th, most in a 4th quarter of any deciding game in the last 20 finals. And then Lowry, who had 26 points. How about that for a bounce? The rims have been awfully friendly to the Raptors this postseason. The Warriors respond. Boogie Cousins, give him credit, 0 lift, basically playing flat-footed. He had 12 points. Raptors up 1. The one thing they can't do is turn it over with 10 seconds to go. Danny Green pressured by Draymond. So the Warriors have a chance, and they have the ball. Scary entry pass here. Steph, good look for a 3, and the lead, and it won't go with a scramble for the loose ball as the time burns off. Draymond calls a timeout that they didn't have. That's a technical. It really wouldn't have mattered. The game would have been over if he doesn't call a timeout. The Raptors hang on to win 114-110. The Finals MVP, Kawhi, on this redemptive season.
Just to be able to win this championship this year is something special for me because you know how the last year everybody was looking at me, and I stayed true to myself, and I had a great support system. And once I got here to Toronto, they understood everything, and the move kept moving from there.
To be able to say I'm a world champion, it makes me feel great. And to do it with a group of guys that we did it with is amazing. It's just, it's kind of still surreal. It hasn't hit me yet.
It's hard to put into words how I feel about our team. What I've witnessed, an incredible combination of talent and character and commitment to each other. A group of guys like this don't come around together and do what they did over the last 5 years.
I wouldn't bet against us, being back on the stage, next year and going forward.
Everybody thinks it's kind of end of us. That's just not smart. We're not done yet. I hear a lot of that noise. It's the end of a run and all that jazz. I don't see it happening, though. We'll be back.
Will you be back? Well, it's never too early to look ahead. Because of key injuries to Kevin Durant and Klay Thompson, These folks are the best odds to win the 2020 NBA title. The Warriors are 5th favorite for next year's title. Newly crowned Raptors, 1 ahead at 4th. And look at here. I don't know who did this. Maybe they reached out to me. My Lakers, sitting right at the top. I know David Lloyd is jealous of that. Meanwhile, Stephen A. Smith heard you on the show this morning talking about the Lakers as well. You're in Oakland. Draymond Green simply says it's not smart to say it's the end of a run, but considering those 2 devastating injuries we talked about, free agency around the corner, do you think that the Golden State dynasty is a thing of the past?
I don't think it's a thing of the past. I just think it's going to be on pause for a second because when you've got 2 elite players, Kevin Durant, who I consider to be the best in the world, and Klay Thompson, who's one of the top 5 shooters in the history of basketball, and both of them go down with devastating injuries that could ultimately leave them out an entire season, or at the very least, most of the 2019-2020 season, I think it's fair to avoid expecting the Golden State Warriors to make the conference championship, let alone the NBA Finals. But that's just for next year. If indeed the Warriors do what they say they intend to do, that is offer Klay Thompson a 5-year max, offer KD the 5-year max, and both of them elect to stay, I think 2 years from now, 2 seasons from now, it's definitely plausible that they could be back in the NBA Finals again. And that's the way I look at it. They're just too great to ignore the possibility of that happening. But teams are getting better. Obviously, some of them are going to be younger, and you never know, considering what we witnessed in these playoffs, who might go down for the Warriors in the future. The NBA game obviously is very physical, and there's no guarantee with the mileage that these guys put on their bodies that injuries couldn't be a part of somebody else's situation in the future other than Klay and KD. So you just never know. But I would agree with Steph. Don't count them out.
All right, speaking of injuries, they dogged Kawhi when he was with the last season that he spent with the Spurs. Now he becomes the first ever player to win the Finals MVP in 2 different conferences. It's somewhat odd, even though, to think that we never even talked about him, or a lot of folks didn't talk about him in the regular season. He was not in that conversation. But if you look at this postseason run that the Kawhi and the Raptors had, what did we learn about them?
Well, we learned that we were reminded of the fact that he was a superstar because he plays on both ends of the floor. He accepts every defensive challenge you throw in his direction. And clearly he had a desire to be the #1 offensive option because he felt he could carry a team. And then he went out there and proved it throughout these playoffs in the series against the Philadelphia 76ers, definitely against the Milwaukee Bucks, and obviously in the NBA Finals. He was absolutely sensational, at least up until Game 6 last night, where I look at Kyle Lowry, who had 26 points, 10 assists, and Pascal Siakam, who had 26 points and 10 rebounds, and I give them an awful lot of credit, along with Fred VanVleet and his 22 points off the bench, and of course Serge Ibaka, who had 3 big games, 6 blocks in Game 3, 20 points in Game 4, 15 in the closeout Game 6. They all deserve credit, but in the end, I think the thing to peel from Kawhi Leonard is that he's a man of high basketball character, and even though we want to refrain from calling out the San Antonio Spurs because clearly they are first class all the way, and their history gives them warrants rather the benefit of the doubt to some degree, to hear Kawhi Leonard being as candid as he was in his post-game comments. It's one thing to win the title. It's another thing to allude to the folks in the media counting you out, courtesy of what the media was being told tacitly or otherwise by the San Antonio Spurs organization in terms of questioning, the legitimacy of his injury. This is not me. This is not the media talking about this. This is the media members echoing what was emanating outside of the Spurs locker room, courtesy of Tony Parker and others. And obviously Kawhi Leonard felt a bit salty about the Spurs organization because we heard his uncle speaking about that just weeks ago. And so when you are as candid as he was last night in the aftermath of winning a championship, clearly that's something that rested on your soul, where you felt your character was brought into question. And obviously anybody who would question that about him right now doesn't look good. And he basically said, the Spurs questioned that about me, and he had a problem with it.
Yeah, he said he stayed focused, true to people that were around him, and listened to that, not distracted. Stephen A. Smith, great job entire postseason. Thank you so much for joining us here on Coast to Coast.
Thank you.
Carrie, we got Woj here to talk about what's next for the Warriors, a team which didn't just lose the finals, they lost 2 of their superstars, 2 guys who can be free agents this upcoming offseason. How do you see the Warriors playing this, knowing that sounds like KD's not going to play next year, Clay's going to be out for a good chunk of the season?
Now, the Warriors remain committed to signing both players to long-term, max contracts. And I think with Klay Thompson, he was sort of waiting to know whether he would get that full 5-year, $190 million plus max deal. Once he had that offer, gets that offer from Golden State, he's made it clear he wants to stay. If he gets something south of that, they run the risk of him going to take meetings in June 30th, July free agency. Kevin Durant, even with the Achilles injury, he can expect to get the full 5-year max offer from the Warriors. They still see a long-term future with two players. Yeah, next year is a mulligan for them, but these are players who are still young enough, who are at the very top of their craft. And the Warriors are not looking to disassemble this team, but it is going to be on pause if they could sign both.
It's going to be a strange season for the Warriors as they move to San Francisco next year. Let's go to the Raptors. Kawhi Leonard, not a rental, maybe a 1-year lease, though. And you've been telling us the whole time the Raptors have been behind in trying to get him to a long-term contract. Does winning a championship, becoming a national hero in Canada, does that soften Kawhi's stance on staying in Toronto?
If it does, I'm not sure that he has shared that with anybody beyond maybe those the very closest to him. I don't know how much emotion, sentiment goes into a decision for Kawhi Leonard. Only he does. I think he's always been pretty pragmatic in his thinking. He came to Toronto with the idea from San Antonio. This was a very fine 1-year way station, and it, I'm sure, exceeded his expectations, how they managed him physically, to be a finals MVP again, to win a championship. But there was always the risk of him going back west. The LA Clippers are at the very top of that list, and I think the Raptors still have work to do between now and June 30th and the start of free agency to keep Kawhi Leonard in Toronto.
All right, there you go. Woj giving us the latest. The season's over. The offseason is going to be rather interesting as well.
All right, David, much more to come. And on the finals, Kawhi on